Hello, this is Kelly Hamon, and welcome to the Resiliency Coach podcast. This podcast showcases people who have faced difficult times and how they got through it. These experiences are real and sometimes raw. The people who share their stories are here to tell you you're not alone in your struggle. They share the tools and resources they use in healing. If you're looking for solutions for getting through tough times, contact us at www.resiliency.coach. So today I'm interviewing my friend Marva Yapias. Marva was a single mom who raised 5 children while going to graduate school and working a full-time job, and is currently writing a book about that experience. So Marva, thank you so much for joining me today on my podcast.
Thank you for having me on. I appreciate it very much.
You're welcome. Would you be willing to share your story now?
Sure will. Okay, my story basically just begins in spring of 1998, so quite a while ago. I'm living in Provo, Utah with my husband and our 4 children, 2, 4, 6, and 8. And we've been, married 9 years, had 4 children already, like I said, and had our fair share of ups and downs like most married couples do. So we were at the time in a down phase, but I figured we'd come out on top like we always had before, right? So I didn't worry about it too much. So when I realized I was unexpectedly expecting our 5th child, I, didn't worry about it too much. I figured, we'll be fine. But I was totally wrong. The evening I told my husband that we were expecting our 5th child, he confessed to an extramarital affair and said that a wife and children were tying him down and he needed to go find himself. So a short time later, he moved out. We were divorced in the fall of that year, and in Christmas, 2 days before Christmas in 1998, a neighbor drove me to the hospital to have my son. We came home on Christmas Day and started climbing this life with 5 little children, including a newborn baby.
When you were getting a divorce, were you going to school at the same time, at that same time while you were pregnant?
I was working at a different job, but just like a minimum wage job, obviously not going to make it even with child support. So my brother-in-law has this crazy idea that I should go to the graduate school. And I'm like, I can't do that. I've got 5 kids. I work all day. I just can't do it. That just sounded too hard. But as soon as he said that, it just clicked in my brain like, yes, this is what you need to do. So I did. I went to the University of Phoenix. It was at the time the only school anywhere near me that had anything at night for working adults, right? So I arranged for my church group. They babysat my children on Thursday evenings when I went into class, and on Saturdays when I had my study group, they made dinner for them, helped them with homework. So it kind of became like a neighborhood project for 2 years but they did that for 2 years. I was in grad school. And even when grad school was over, they still wanted to go to these neighbors' houses because they were so much funner than I was. But so that's when I went to grad school. Then I started worked a couple other jobs, and then I started working at BYU. But without that experience of grad school, I would never have been able to get on at BYU, I don't think, without that advanced degree. So it was hard. I would do homework with my son was only a year when I started. My daughter was 3. I would be typing or reading with one of them on each knee, right? Trying to do that, put them to bed at a decent hour. And I'd be up to like 12, 1 or 2, trying to study or do homework or whatever. So it was a rough 2 years, but I think my kids learned a lot of good lessons from it as well.
Yeah, I bet. And so was it after you gave birth to your child that you were pregnant that you went to graduate school, or while you were in graduate school?
My youngest son was a year old when I started. So he was born, and then I just worked at this minimum wage job basically for like a year, trying to figure out what to do. But it was just like, because, I knew I couldn't keep going where I was, but the thought of anything bigger just seemed so overwhelming. I mean, my son was a baby, and I had this 2-year-old besides him and 3 other kids. And then plus just all the regular divorce stuff going on, the emotions are raw, and, just a lot of anger, unresolved anger still flying, through the air and whatnot. So that first year was just kind of rough. So I felt like I needed to kind of give us all kind of some breathing spaces before I started grad school. So it ended up being a year, 11 months. But so he was 11 months old when I went to started grad school.
And did you take him with you to grad school, or did you have somebody watch him too?
My neighbors watched all 5 of my kids. My neighbors watched them. They send a sign up around church every Sunday for 2 years, and they knew I'd drop them off about 5:45, pick them up about 9:45, 10:15, and I did that for 2 years, and they helped me a lot.
That's amazing and wonderful. So I hear the resources you used while going through this difficult time. And by the way, after you graduated from graduate school, did you immediately find a job, or did you have to look for a job? How did you find your job?
I had to look for quite a while. It was a couple years after that. I was working in a doctor's office, which was great for what it was. They were really flexible with my schedule, and I could get time off. It was close to where my kids went to school, but it just didn't pay really great. So while it was better than what I had before, it just, still wasn't enough. So it took a few years of looking, and actually how I got the job at BYU was a friend. I had actually seen the job posted on the BYU website, but I wasn't interested because it was heavy accounting, and I didn't have a degree in accounting, right? I'd had one semester in all of my graduate and undergraduate work. But my neighbor was like, we've interviewed people. We don't like anybody. Come and interview, see what happens, So I scheduled the interview, and I go, I don't hear anything for like 2.5 weeks, 3 weeks. And I'm like, oh, it means I didn't get it right, So I was happy I was done. But then they call me and say, oh, the district manager or whatever had been sick. So that's where they hadn't acted on the position. And so I ended up getting the job. But it took a few years, but it was, again, a friend who encouraged me to apply for this job, which, like I said, I had looked at the position and was not interested because it was so heavy accounting. And then he ended up being one on the interviewing board to interview me, and ended up being my trainer once I was hired. He did all the accounting training with me. So that turned out to be a tremendous blessing in and of itself as well.
Absolutely. So it sounds like the things that you use, the people, resources, or tools you use to be able to get through that difficult time were your religion, people at church, your neighbors, and your family also, because they gave you the suggestion, and a job referral through friends, which is great too. Are there any other tools that you can think of that you use, especially during the divorce, or you said you waited because of those emotions, anything that you else or people you used?
Yeah, I love reading. So I just read every single self-help book that was out there. How to Win Friends and Influence People, 7 Habits of Highly Successful People, Crucial Conversations, Influencer, you name it. If it's a self-help book, Quiet, that Susan Cain book, I read that. That was kind of how I calmed myself, once I was done with grad school, how I would just kind of refill my bucket, so to speak, was reading. So I had like all these ideas in my head, things I was trying to do, realizing that with my ex-husband, I probably needed to be the one who remained calm, who remained in the dark, because a lot of the times he wasn't that way, right? And I wanted to minimize the negative, the negativity on my kids, and, divorce in and of itself is just ugly. So I wanted to, minimize that ugliness for my kids. So reading kind of helped me, just give me ideas to try and to work through. And a lot of them I think were helpful. So reading for me helped, self-help books. But yeah, I did draw on friends and neighbors and my church group a lot, but I did do a lot of reading as well. So
reading is a good thing. And I've interviewed other people too that have used books in their path of healing and recovery and in success also. So reading is definitely a great tool to use.
And along the way, I learned several things that I hope can share, that can help other people as I share them with them. The first thing I learned was life is overwhelming at times. So the only way we can get through it is just one step at a time. No matter how teeny, how tiny that step is, one step at a time. That's all you can do. And then those steps compound and they build, and you've accomplished great things. The second thing I learned is you've got to ask for help. None of us can get through life alone. We are all going to need help physically, emotionally, financially. And what I've learned is people want to help. If we can ask, people will help if we ask. But it's a lot easier for me to receive than it is to get, it's easier for me to give than it is to receive. So that was a big stumbling block for me. I had to just say, I need help. And I was amazed at what I got. And the third step, I think that is important, the third thing to realize is that we all need friends to go with us on this journey that we're on, whether it's single parenting or overcoming other forms of abuse, or even just trying to get through work and life and kids and family or no kids or whatever. We need to find time to have friends, to take care of ourselves. And another thing I learned, I live in Utah. It's always surrounded by mountains, right? And so my kids and I, needing inexpensive recreation, we'd go hike the mountains and the canyons around our house. And every time I did, they'd pretty much race up to the top and I would struggle. But once I got to the top, I was amazed by how beautiful the view was. Once I got to the top, the view was wide, the perspective is enhanced. When we get through these obstacles, we can see what's the view is much better from the top if we can just get there. And then I think the final thing that I've realized is each journey is our own. We have to just embrace our journey, our challenges, our strengths, our weaknesses, our challenge. It doesn't do us any good to compare, my pain is less than your pain or whatever, your pain is greater than mine. It's not a contest. Life just sometimes hurts. Pain is pain, and by comparing ourselves, we don't do anybody any good. So embrace your journey as yours, help someone else along the way, and receive help when they offer it to you in turn. So that's basically a nutshell of my journey, of my story, and just a real short summary of things that I've learned in the past 20 plus years of single parenting and raising my kids.
What's the name of the book that you're writing?
The name of my book is called Your Mountain is Calling.
And tell me a little bit more about the purpose of your book.
The purpose of my book, basically, I'm just highlighting those 5 lessons I gave. I'm expanding on those five lessons that I kind of highlighted in my story. And I'm just expanding on them, what I've learned, by taking one step at a time, breaking everything down, like tiny habits, tiny goals, learning to ask for help. Why we don't ask for help sometimes. I got a section on obstacles to asking for help, and establishing boundaries with our friends, neighbors, coworkers, former spouses, whatever. I've got a section on self-care and daily restorations, and train your brain, get that negative self-talk gone so that you can eliminate the barriers that you place in your own life, and then enjoying the mountains that you're on, your challenges that you're on, finding the courage to step out of your comfort zone, to take that next step. You're at the top of this mountain. Yay. What do you do now? There's another one out there. So keep, just taking that next step, the next step forward. So basically just expanding on those 5 lessons. But I picked the mountain analogy because I've lived in mountains my whole life. I grew up in Wyoming. We always vacationed in the Tetons, lived in Utah Valley my whole, adult life, where every direction you look, there are mountains. You can't escape them. And like I said, we've hiked a lot of mountains with my kids as they were growing up, and the views from the top really are amazing. Getting to the top sometimes is hard, but once you get there, the view's glorious if you can just get to the top. So
That's awesome. And you talked about how to get rid of the negative self-talk. How did you do that?
well, I found a book. There's a book that really got me thinking about it. It's called What to Say When You Talk to Yourself. And basically, it's just affirmations that you reaffirm to yourself every day. Like, I am powerful, I am successful, I am loved, I am courageous. And basically, you just start repeating this to yourself over and over again. And you just, pay attention to what you say to yourself. I don't think we start to realize how much we talk to ourselves. Every thought you have in your brain is you talking to yourself. In the past 2 years, I've lost 65 pounds, but I'm like, all I focus on is the 30 pounds that I still have left to go, right? That's negative self-talk. Why can't I just say, yeah, I've worked hard to, lose this 65 pounds. I still have this other to do, but that's a battle that you have to fight every day. Because if you don't, those negative thoughts just kind of creep in, especially if you're on social media and you see everybody's perfect life and their perfect figures and, their perfect little whatever. It's like, that's so not me, because I'm not in any way perfect in any regard. So it's just, but again, I had to break it down to that one step at it, one positive thought at a time, one. And then it just builds and builds and builds.
You also talked about self-care. How important was it while you were going through graduate school, raising 5 kids, working? Did you have time for self-care? What did it look like then? What does it look like now?
It's very important to me now. I'm almost an empty nester now. 3 of my children are married. 2 are, in college and trying to get that way. So I'm almost empty. So I have a lot more free time. So reading, it has been always, as I can remember, little, I've loved reading. So I've just kind of expanded my reading. And I enjoy walking. I'm outside walking. I walk 6, 7, 8 miles a day. That's kind of what I do. Those are my 2 forms of self-care, and learning just to be quiet during the day. Sometimes, turning off the phone, off the TV, everything, and just thinking. I have to have that quiet every day to kind of just sort through things and see what's there. So, but obviously raising kids, there wasn't a lot of self-care. So I often felt at times like a leaky bucket, water streaming around everywhere. And, like a dried up old wooden bucket, I think it's probably a better definition, because there just wasn't that time. I tried to find snippets here and there between homework and housework and daycare and work and everything, but there just wasn't enough on a regular basis, when they were little especially. But we tried to fit it in, as best we could here and there, and obviously wasn't enough. But now it's a lot better. But it is so important. It is so important. Even a little bit of it can go a long ways, I think.
What would you tell somebody that's feeling like you did, overworked, underpaid, going to school, taking care of those kids? What other piece of advice would you give to be able to give themselves that self-care that they may need? What type of self-care do you think they could have and get?
I think, other than not giving, I'm thinking asking for help. I had one of the best piece of advice I ever had came from my ecclesiastical leader, just as my ex-husband had moved out. He was like, you need time to be quiet every day. You've got major decisions you're making, involving you and 5 children. You've got to get those right. If you need quiet time every day and you can't find it, you call me, and my wife and I will come over to your house and watch your kids. So I never had to do that, because I would always, stay up late, kind of thing. So I never had to ask him to do that. But just the fact that he offered. And I had another neighbor lady who brought me chocolate once a month when I was in grad school, and she would tell me not to share it with my kids. She'd sneak it in somewhere, in a pocket or under a couch pillow or something when my kids weren't looking. So I'm like, ask for help, because you can't go. You just need the self-care. if you can, find little snippets of it here and there during the day, but if you're working 2 jobs or something, that's going to be really hard. So ask for help as much as you can. Draw on the community. If, there's community resources, like I think in my community, there was like a Turning Point resource, I think at one time, I don't know if it is there now, where single moms could go for like career coaching and resume training, and the state provided daycare assistance and things like that. Church groups, neighborhood groups, friends, family, if you've got them, but ask for help and take all the help you can get. And, asking for help doesn't mean you fail. That means you're determined to succeed, because you recognize that you can't keep doing like this. Eventually, that leaky old dried up bucket is going to fall apart and not be good to anybody. So ask for help. And I would say keep asking for help until you get what you need.
That's good. That's great advice. You also talked about boundaries.
Right.
How important was that?
Well, boundaries are so important. I think every relationship that's, kind of in a crisis probably has a boundary issue at the heart of it. And it was most difficult with my ex-husband. He comes from a different culture than me. And so, he has different boundary, requirements, needs, expectations, whatever. And even after our divorce, he would kind of assume that he could come in if I was at home and, be with the kids and vacuum or clean or whatever. And I just had to say, no, you can't do that. And it got ugly at times, because he just, he moved out, he divorced, he was with somebody else, but he would just keep coming into my home. I actually moved and got a new home that he had never lived in before, and that helped. But boundaries need to be established clearly and frequently, and until they take. If that means not being with a person for a while, not returning calls or texts, or not going to an event or something, then we have to do that. But until those can be respected, because that's self-care. You have to take care of yourself and your children. And if the boundaries can't be respected, then you just need to remove yourself from them so that they can be respected.
Absolutely, yes. Boundaries are good for yourself, needed for yourself as well as your family. And when we keep boundaries, we teach others how we should be treated, because we're treating ourselves that way.
Yeah, people generally treat us the way we tell them, whether inadvertently or otherwise, how to treat us. The things we tolerate is how we will be treated, accordingly. So important. But that was a big eye opener for me, because I never really had a term for that until, just, thinking about this and thinking through it. It's like, no boundary there. That's why this happened. No boundary here. So important. They prevent a lot of heartache, a lot of anger, a lot of anxiety, if they can just be established.
Got a question for you. With him going into your house when you weren't home, and with you telling him no, had the police ever been involved in that?
No, we didn't. He usually would just leave. Most of the time he left before I got there. I find out about it. He'd come pick up the kids. It was his day to visit or something. So usually he had left before I got there. So I never called the police. Looking back, maybe I should have, but I never did.
And there may be women who are listening that may have a situation where a husband is a physical threat to them, that the husband's still going into their home and still causing that situation. And was there any physical threat of any sort?
I'm thinking how to say this. There was, while we were married, there was physical and emotional abuse. He'd break like glass, I wore glasses, so those would be broken. I'd have like a fat lip. I'd have, bruises on my legs and feet. But, it was, being an abused spouse was embarrassing to me because, we're supposed to be this happy, perfect model family, right? And we weren't. It was embarrassing. So, I would hide it. I wouldn't attend family events. If they come up, I would say, oh, I ran into the doorknob or into the desk at work, or I played soccer with my kids or something. I would make up excuses. And listening to other people's stories, it didn't seem that bad because I didn't have to go to the hospital. Nothing was broken. There was never stitches. It was just bruises, right? And he was always sorry. And he'd go months without doing anything, So, it was just, I always would think, oh, if I could just be better, if I would just, cook dinner better and iron his clothes the right way and, do everything he wants me to do exactly perfect, then he's not going to be angry anymore, right? But I could never be perfect enough, and so obviously it ended when he moved out, thankfully. So coming full circle, divorce is probably the best thing that could have happened for my kids and I. We were in a better situation all the way around when he left.
Yeah, absolutely. If somebody's going through that situation, abusive spouse, what advice would you give them?
That's a hard one because, it is, to me, it was intensely embarrassing, just to be abused. But I would say, for the sake of your kids, find the courage to leave. I have a son who's a police officer, so I know restraining orders aren't worth a whole lot of paper, more than the paper they're written on sometimes. But if that helps, do that. If you got family or a friend you can stay with, or even a shelter, but it's all just so hard and so, intensely personal and heartbreaking. But first of all, you got to realize you're not the one to blame. Something's wrong with, if your spouse is abusing you, something's wrong with them, not you. That took me a long time to realize. Like I said, I kept thinking, oh, if I just were better, if I were, better cook, better perfect at everything. No, it wasn't. The problem wasn't with me. But I think sometimes, for the sake of your children, you just have to get them out of that situation too, because they're learning what you will tolerate is maybe what they're going to tolerate later, or what they will become later. So, and I don't know what resources are available. Probably not as much as is needed, but find what resources rather, if you can. But I know it's hard. It's heartbreaking. It's hard. It's embarrassing. It's terrifying. But get out if you can, I would say.
Absolutely. And there are resources. There is a nationwide phone number they can call, and that information will be put at the bottom of the podcast so that people can look at that. Usually in those places, there's given counseling and there's food, as well as educational opportunities and things like that they actually will help them with, as well as rehousing. So what I'll do is put a phone number, a federal, like an 800 number, where women and or men, because some men are being abused also.
Right.
We don't hear it as much because, like you said, it's embarrassing. And for anybody dealing with it, because often the abuser makes the abused feel embarrassed. They make them feel like the abused have done something wrong. If somebody was listening right now and going through the difficulty and challenges that you did go through, what type of advice would you give them?
First thing I would say is not to quit. Never quit. No matter how many times you fall, get back up. Keep trying, because you're doing better than you think you are. We get down this thick and thin of life, and we don't realize how good we're doing. I love running, and I love to go outside. And sometimes I just focus so much on the ground in front of me, I don't look ahead to see where I am. And oftentimes when I do that, I'm almost at my goal, So I would say, try everything. Just don't quit. Just don't quit. Just love yourself. Ask for help if you can, but don't quit. Don't give up on you. Don't give up on your dreams, your kids, anybody. You just have to keep going, because you are doing better than you think you are. Just keep climbing, keep trying. and don't give up ever. So all I could say is don't give up. That's just don't give up. Keep trying.
Great advice. And I love the analogy too. So if somebody wanted to contact you, how would they do that?
My Gmail account is msyapias@gmail.com.
Awesome. And can you spell that for them just in case they don't
It's
know how to
just
spell it?
M-N-S and then Y-A-P-I-A-S. msyapias@gmail.com.
Thank you, Marva, for sharing your story with us.
Thank you. Thank you. I've just really enjoyed this, and, I really just want this to be like a resource, my book and what I do after that. We all just got to, stick together, love one another, encourage one another, but just never give up. You can never give up. And that's probably the number one lesson I've learned, never give up.
Absolutely. Thank you again, Marva. And thank you, audience, for listening to Marva. And remember, there is a way through your difficulty. Please seek out resources and people who can and will help you. Now, if you're looking for alternative tools for handling difficult times or moving ahead in life, contact us at www.resiliency.coach. Hope you all have a blessed day and a wonderful life. Goodbye.